Apprenticeship, Learning to Love, Serve, and Be Like Jesus with Rebecca and Douglas Pereira.
We want to move beyond mere head knowledge about Jesus and his kingdom. To do that, we will draw close to him. We will listen and watch, and we will practice. As we do this, we will be transformed. We will truly love, serve, and be like him. This is what the apprenticeship is all about.
Hello, and welcome to the apprenticeship. I'm Olivia, and I'm an apprentice of Jesus. I'm learning from my parents, Rebecca and Douglas Pereira, how to love, serve, and be like Jesus. During his time on earth, Jesus spoke a lot about God's kingdom. He showed us what God's kingdom is like. And now, he teaches us, his apprentices, how to live like God's kingdom is a reality. This way of living can be summed up in the Apprentice's Creed. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Love others as well as you love yourself. But just how do we live like that? That's what the apprenticeship is all about. This episode comes with a study guide. It can help you review the topics and apply the concepts to your life. You can find it on our website or by scanning the QR code.
In his footsteps.
We're continuing our walk in Jesus' footsteps through the Gospel of Luke. We've covered a lot of ground, and we're still only in the first chapter. We've read why Luke wrote this gospel. We've read how Zechariah learned that he will be a father and why. And we've listened in on the conversation between Mary and the angel Gabriel. And we witnessed a beautiful moment between Mary and Elizabeth, two women who testified to God's miraculous power.
Now, Luke brings us back to the story of Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John. Our passage today is Luke 1, 57 to 66, where he tells us the story of John's birth. Before we dive in, let's have our son, Christopher, read this week's memory verse.
He motioned for a writing tablet, and to everyone's surprise, he wrote, "His name is John." Instantly, Zechariah could speak again, and he began praising God.
The last time we saw Zechariah, he doubted God's power to do the impossible. As a result, he was made mute and possible deaf until his son was named. In today's reading, we get a very different picture of Zechariah.
We definitely do. It seems Zechariah learned a lot during his months of silence. And in this story, he had the chance to show what he learned. But before we go much further, let's first summarize the story. John was born, and Elizabeth's neighbors and relatives were very happy for her. 8 days later, they came to witness the baby's circumcision and hear the name of the baby. Of course, they all had an opinion about the name.
To everyone's shock, Elizabeth said that the baby's name is John. They pressure her to change the name to Zechariah in honor of the baby's father. Then they disregarded Elizabeth's wishes and appealed to Zechariah. They expected he would agree with them. Luke says they signed their question to him, which could mean they used sign language to convey their question. This is why some scholars believe Zechariah may have been deaf as well as mute.
Here was Zechariah's moment. Unable to speak, he wrote down his decision. What name did he write? Did he go along with social expectations and tradition, or did he stay true to God's will?
He wrote, "His name is John." The act of obedience loosened his tongue and he could speak again. And his first words were praise to God.
These extraordinary events caught everyone's attention. They began to wonder who John would become. First century people had no trouble overcoming the lack of internet, radio, or TV. They still managed to spread the story of John's birth far and wide so that many people were talking about it. It became a sort of watch this space story.
Oh, yes. Everyone was primed and ready to see what John would become. When he began his mission, you can bet people remember the story of his birth.
It is an incredible story. It was very personal to Zechariah and Elizabeth, as all birth stories are to the parents. It was also significant to the people of the day because of the miraculous events connected to the birth. And there is something in it for us today as well.
Definitely. Zachariah and Elizabeth faced a choice. Do they stay true to God's will? Or do they give way to the expectation of others? We are often faced with a similar choice: to obey God or give in to the pressure to go against His will. That pressure can come from others, our circumstances, or from within ourselves. Which do we choose to follow?
In the case of Zechariah and Elizabeth, it was reasonable for neighbors and relatives to expect the baby to be named Zechariah. After all, it was their culture and custom to do so. But in this case, God had given specific instructions about the baby's name. Elizabeth and Zechariah chose to stay true to God's will, even in the face of communal pressure. They show their loyalty to God by obeying His instructions.
They model an aspect of God's kingdom mindset.
That's right. A mindset is something internal. The only way to see is through someone's actions.
And their actions reveal an attitude of surrender. That is a key aspect of the kingdom mindset. Those with a kingdom mindset are willing to surrender to God's will. They trust God's plans are best, even when they don't understand them. They show their surrender by obeying God's commands, by remaining faithful to Him.
And there's a wonderful outcome to the kingdom mindset, especially to practicing surrender. When we surrender to God's will and His ways, we profoundly experience His presence. As long as we hold on to our own way and our own will, there isn't room for God in our lives.
But when we choose to align our will with God's, we can grow closer to Him. We can know Him better and trust Him more. And in turn, He can do amazing things in us and through us.
The Apostle Peter wrote about surrender and how it brings us closer to God. He said, "So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time, He will lift you up in honor. Give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you."
In other words, surrender to God's sovereign power. Trust in His timing and plans, and trust His heart toward you. When we do that, we can feel and experience His care for us.
The key is to surrender to Him.
Thank you for joining us on The Apprenticeship. We hope you are enjoying this show and its resources. You know, The Apprenticeship and its resources wouldn't be possible without Agents of Hope. You may be wondering, who are Agents of Hope? Well, they're people who are committed to sharing our hope in Jesus. They believe in the vision of Hope Channel Canada and support this ministry. Through their support, Agents of Hope make programming like The Apprenticeship possible. Their support means uplifting content can reach Canadians wherever they are. Would you like to help us? You can become an Agent of Hope too. You can visit the website or scan the QR code. Together we can share with Canada that there's more to life, and it's found in Jesus.
In His workshop.
We are created in God's image. That means we have an identity, a purpose, and a mission.
But sin prevents us from fully living out of our God-given identity, purpose, and mission. Without help, we will never know what it means to be created in God's image.
And this is why we come into Jesus' workshop, Here, He can shape us into who He created us to be. He can prepare us to do what He created us to do. In His workshop, Jesus uses certain tools to shape us. Douglas, can you tell us a little bit about these tools?
God uses three main shaping tools. He can use people in your lives, He can use events or pivotal moments in our lives, and He can use the environment we are in, or in other words, our circumstances.
That makes sense. But maybe it would help if you could give us an example. What do these shaping tools look like in action?
Sure, I can give us some personal example. I grew up as a pastor's kid in Brazil. My father gave me many opportunities to serve. Sometimes I even preached for him when he was sick. I also grew up in the world of communications. From an early age, I learned about broadcast media, using equipment and being in front of the camera. That is the environment I grew up in. When I was 12 years old, I attended a Pathfinder camporee. One of the speakers invited those who wished to become pastors to come to the front for prayer and connection. Even though I was only 12, I knew I wanted to be a pastor. I went down to the front. Out of about 2,000 kids, only 4 of us went to the front. That was a pivotal moment in my life. The dream of becoming a pastor never left my heart. I became a pastor, but I still had some growing to do. That's where my beautiful wife comes in. I'm a very goal-oriented person. Many would say that it is a strength, but it can and does come at cost. I'll be honest and say that my focus on goals can sometimes come at the expense of people. But God has used Rebecca to teach me to slow down and remember people. Being married to Rebecca has taught me so much. One of which is how to push toward the goal without plowing over people. And that makes me a much better pastor and person.
Thank you, Douglas. Being married to you has grown me as a person as well. And thank you for sharing that. They really illustrate how God used our environment, pivotal moments in our lives, and people to shape us.
Lastly, I would add that sometimes we can ask God for an answer to prayer, and He sends a person, an event, or a circumstance. And conversely, we can be the person that God sends to someone else.
In our last episode, we discussed how God shapes us to be more like Jesus. He does this by shaping our thinking, being, and doing. We also call these our mindset, our character, and our ways of living or our service. Well, God applies these shaping tools to these areas of our lives. He uses His tools to develop our thinking, being, or doing.
That's right, Rebecca. God may use His shaping tools to strengthen our values. He may use them to refine our character. He may deepen our convictions or something. Or He may build our skill set so we can serve more effectively.
But Douglas, can we see how God is shaping us? Is it something we can actually detect?
Yes, I believe so. We can look at the outcome of person's influence on us, or the environment we are in, or a pivotal moment in our life. We often learn important life lessons when God is shaping us. And if we are paying attention, we will become more aware of God's presence in our lives. We will be more certain of His purpose for us.
Wow, I really want to experience that. I know that God is always with me, but it is such a gift to experience His presence even more fully, to see what He's doing in me and through me, and even cooperate with Him on the journey. That's bound to draw me closer to Him.
It will for sure. Like Paul, we can reach a point where we see God's working in our lives, whether we are enjoying good times or facing some difficult times.
Paul fully trusted God and His sovereign power. But how did he learn to do that? Well, whatever was happening in his life, he looked for God's hand at work. He learned to see how God used people, events, and environments to shape him.
Paul learned to surrender to God's purpose in whatever was happening, whether he was welcome or whipped, sheltered or shipwrecked. He trusts God's heart, and he trusts that God could use all of it for his purpose, and he surrendered to that purpose.
Paul also learned valuable lessons from these times in his life, and he put these lessons into practice.
And finally, he shared these lessons with others, always pointing them to God.
We could sum it up by saying Paul saw, he surrendered, he learned, and he shared.
That's a great summary, Rebecca. It is something we can do too. God is shaping us. He used his tools to develop our mindset, character, and service. We can learn to see his hand at work. We can practice surrendering to his purpose. We can learn from him, and we can share our experiences.
In the study guide for this episode, we go more into God's shaping tools and how we can see, surrender, learn, and share. I encourage you to download it.
And don't forget to consider our key questions. What is God doing in my life? Do I have the courage to be part of his work? Am I truly willing to join him in his work of redemption in my life and all around me?
On the apprenticeship, we're all about learning. We're focusing on how to love, serve, and be like Jesus. But maybe there's more you'd like to know. Well, did you know that Hope Channel has a learning platform? It's called Hope Study. Hope Study offers courses that connect real life with faith. The studies answers questions like, does God exist? What is the purpose of life? Can I trust the Bible? What happens after death? Why is there suffering? Can I really change? Hope Study is a place to explore life's most profound questions with answers from a biblical perspective. Through Hope Study, you'll discover the Bible's truths and how they can enrich your life, and it's all completely free. I hope you take a look. You can visit our website or scan the QR code.
The Rescue Worker.
One of the most active volcanoes in the world is in Guatemala. It is called Volcán de Fuego, Volcano of Fire. In 2018, Volcán de Fuego erupted. It was the deadliest eruption in Guatemala in over 100 years. Entire villages were buried. Thousands of acres of crops were destroyed, and hundreds of people were killed.
Within hours of eruption, a nearby town began ringing its church bells. When the people came to the church, they were called to start collecting supplies for those affected by the volcano.
Rather than waiting for the government or NGOs to intervene, the community went into action. They worked together to gather food, clothes, blankets, and water. Then they distributed these life-saving supplies to those in need.
This powerful example of community-led relief reminds us how people together can reflect God's love and compassion, especially in times of crisis. They show us a picture of how humans can rise to mercy, generosity, and selfless service. In these moments of collective response, we see God's image restored in people.
This communal response reminded the survivors that they were not alone or forgotten. As the community supported the survivors, they showed God's love in action. They revealed His heart for His children, and they lived His desire for us to care for one another as He cares for us.
Community is essential to being a rescue worker for God. It is the C in our rescue acronym.
Jesus' apprentices are shaped in community. That's often where we find the people, events, and environment God uses to shape us.
And our need for community has its origin in God. God is a community in himself. He is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and we are made in his image.
That means that within us are the seeds of community. For us to truly reflect God, we need to be in a community.
Our need for community also has roots in our creation.
That's right. As God created, he kept saying, "This is good, and this is good." But the first thing that was not good in our perfect world was that Adam was alone.
God met his need with Eve. She was his wife, but she's also more than that. Together, they were the first community.
Jesus showed the importance of community too. When Jesus shaped people for kingdom work, he most often did it in community. Look at the 12 disciples.
You know what's interesting? The term disciple appears 225 times in the Gospels, but only 2 of those times were said by Jesus. Instead, he used much more relational terms, like he called his disciples friends, my brothers, and children. Disciples gives the impression of a top-down arrangement. Jesus interacted with his followers on a loving, communal, relational level.
That's true. Jesus developed his disciples in community. I don't think this strategy has changed since then.
No. I think Jesus showed us the model, and he invites us to participate.
As apprentices of Jesus, we are part of the apprentice community.
The apprentice community is there to provide support, encouragement, and accountability. But Douglas, where do we find this community?
That's a great question, Rebecca. Let's look at different layers of community first and see where we find apprentice community. The first layer is the public community. That tends to be 70 people or more. That seems large when compared to the model Jesus showed us. So, likely this is not the good candidate for the apprentice community, though it does have its purpose. Then there is the social community, which is a bit smaller than the public. It is between 20 and 50 people. But for the close connection an apprentice community can bring, this is still too large. The public and social levels of community have their purposes, but they make it challenging to deeply connect with people or to learn and grow together. Deep connection, accountability, and growth really start happening at the personal level of community. This is around 5 to 12 people. And you're probably guessed, this is where an apprentice community can flourish.
That makes so much sense. It's much easier to open up with the smaller group.
Precisely. And there is one more level of community that's even smaller than that. It is the intimate level. This level has 2 to 4 people in it.
So, a marriage is a type of intimate community. It has 2 people. Jesus had an intimate community as well, didn't he? It was with Peter, James, and John.
Precisely. This size too can be an apprentice community. But community, especially an apprentice community, is more than just its size.
Absolutely. An apprentice community has 3 essential traits: grace, trust, and support. Grace empowers the community members to be accepting, kind, and caring. They can give and enjoy freedom. They can forgive, protect, and also heal.
Trust makes the community a safe place for its members. And where there is trust, there is openness to learn, to be vulnerable, and to change. This is essential if growth is going to happen.
And when an apprentice community offers support, its members know they are not alone. They are understood and supported in their journey and their struggles. The community gives encouragement, assistance, practical feedback, empowerment, and hope. A community with grace, trust, and support fosters godly development.
That's right, that's right. And that development is not intended for each member alone. It is intended to benefit the community as well.
And not only the immediate community, but all levels of the community, from the most intimate to the most public.
That's right. God shaped us in community for the community. And so we can be His rescue workers.
As God created the world, He would step back to celebrate, to say that it was good, until it wasn't. What wasn't good? That man was alone. So God created a helper for him, a companion. It was the first marriage and the first community. It is not good for us to be alone. We were created to be in community, to support each other, to learn from each other, and to spur each other on to truth, love, and godliness. So, why not start an apprentice community? An apprentice community is a small group of people who are dedicated to being Jesus' apprentices, to creating a community of grace, trust, and support. Each episode of the apprenticeship has a study guide designed for small groups. They can be found on the website or by scanning the QR code for each episode. Through group activities and discussions, the study guides review concepts and give practical applications for real life. They would give meaningful purpose and direction to any small group. So, why not start an apprentice community today?
Thank you for joining us today on The Apprenticeship. We hope you were blessed. Douglas and Rebecca covered a lot of information today. The study guide for this episode reviews today's topics with reflection questions and Bible verses for digging deeper. You can use these study guides for personal reflection, or you can use them in a small group. Rebecca and Douglas talked about the importance of the apprentice community today. Why not build an apprentice community where you are? These study guides can help. You can find them on the website or by scanning the QR code. We hope to see you next time on The Apprenticeship.